Karen threw trash at my pregnant wife. She didn't know I advised the mayor on law. It takes a lot to make a city lawyer break. I've written policy on police use of force, deconstructed eminent domain cases, and negotiated million-dollar settlements between protesters and City Hall. But nothing tested my restraint like standing on my front lawn, watching a grown woman throw a container of spoiled coleslaw at my 8-month pregnant wife, and then call her a parasite. We had just moved into Eastwood Ridge, a scenic development on the north edge of Oak Ridge. Quiet, uniform, pristine. It was the kind of place my wife, Amina, had dreamed of for years. After a miscarriage 2 years ago and a difficult IVF journey, this pregnancy felt like a miracle. We wanted peace, fresh air, somewhere she could sit on a swing without worrying about drive-bys or ambulance sirens. Instead, we got Karen Forrester. Karen introduced herself on day one. No cookies, no welcome. Just a laminated packet and a narrowed look. Eastwood adheres to a visual respect charter, she said. I flipped through the packet. Handwritten notes. Rules like no baby clothes or laundry visibly drying on porches. No overt displays of pregnancy unless muted in color palette. All new occupants must submit character reference letters to the Harmony office. I glanced up. This is legal. She smirked. I am the Harmony office. That was our first warning. It escalated fast. On day 3, she left a gentle suggestion to repaint our front door because earth tones conceal bodily transitions better. On day 6, she stood in front of our trash bins, snapping photos. On day 8, she handed Amina a violation notice for public swelling without architectural offsetting. That was the language she used. Public swelling. But it wasn't until day 11 that I lost it. Amina had waddled slowly to the mailbox. Wearing a flowing red dress, she loved the one that made her feel radiant. She opened the box, smiled at a card inside, and that's when Karen shouted, trying to lure sympathy with that belly disgusting. Amina blinked. I'm sorry. What Karen marched across the lawn, holding a paper plate of food scraps from her trash. She hurled it at Amina's feet. It splattered. Bits of lettuce, sauce, something yellow. You don't get to turn this block into your personal maternity circus. We have standards. Take your visual pollution back to the west side. I watched it happen from the porch. Amina stood frozen. Her hand cupped her belly. A single tear slid down her cheek. That's when I walked across the grass, calm, controlled, and said, Ma'am, I'd advise you to step back. You just assaulted the wife of the city's legal counsel. Her face turned to stone. Karen Forrester's face twisted into a mask of confusion. Then something worse, defiance wrapped in smugness. You're lying, she sneered. No one important would marry into a mess like that. She gestured at Amina's belly like it was a stain on the HOA logo. That was her second mistake. Her first was thinking her Harmony office was real. I walked Amina inside, helped her change out of the soiled dress, and told her to rest. Then I sat down at my desk, flipped open my laptop, and pulled up every municipal record for Eastwood Ridge. And there it was in plain black and white: Eastwood Ridge Homeowners Association, inactive charter, revoked July 2021. Reason: financial mismanagement, internal complaint escalation, non-compliance with neighborhood board standards. There was no Harmony office, no visual charter, no power behind the laminated pages Karen carried like scripture. She'd taken the name of a dissolved HOA and reinvented it as her personal regime. I kept digging. What I found made my blood boil. Karen had formed a private nonprofit, the Eastwood Integrity Foundation, listed under her name, and one other, Gregory Shearer, a local developer who'd been banned from operating in 2 other counties for predatory land use practices. Together, they'd funneled over $94,000 in beautification contributions, resident alignment funds, involuntary appearance stipends. The victims, mostly newcomers, mostly renters, mostly people who didn't blend in, and especially pregnant women, disabled adults, and large families. Karen's Harmony guidelines had specific language: unapproved external swelling, gestational or other must be balanced with muted dress and porch restraint. Procreative signage: stork signs. Baby on board, Balloon wreaths are prohibited within visibility radius. High-frequency visitation of EED. Large family households can result in a Tier 2 disturbance flag. She wasn't running an HOA. She was enforcing a whitewashed aesthetic caste system. The next morning, I was at City Hall before sunrise. I walked into the mayor's office with a binder in one hand and a folder labeled Urgent Code disguised as coercion. Mayor Sarita Navarro read in silence. She's not easily rattled, former public defender, the first Latina woman to hold office in Oak Ridge. But when she got to the part where Karen described my wife as a gestational hazard to visual equilibrium, she shut the folder gently and said, Elijah, I want a full-scale investigation. I want it public, and I want it now. By lunchtime, my legal team had filed for an injunction against Karen's foundation, citing unauthorized enforcement of neighborhood policy, fraudulent collection of fines and contributions, discrimination under the state's fair housing standards, endangerment and harassment of a pregnant resident. The city issued a cease and desist. Karen's compliance team, 2 teenagers she paid in Target gift cards, were told to stand down. And I posted a public statement on the city's official website: no private individual, dissolved HOA, or aesthetic council has the legal authority to harass, shame, or discriminate against residents, especially those carrying the future of our community in their arms, hands, or wombs. Karen responded exactly how I expected. She printed 300 flyers with the heading, "The Mayor's Office has been infiltrated by urban chaos," and handed them out at the bus stop. She called me a constitutional liability with a fertility fetish. She said Amina's pregnancy was performative gestation for political gain. But that's when things turned against her, because someone filmed her. A neighbor posted the video on Facebook, Karen screaming at Amina from across the street, waving a broom like a baton. I don't care if she's due tomorrow, she's turning the cul-de-sac into a fertility cult. It went viral, then the comments came, then the press, then the calls from state reps. The video hit 94,000 views in less than 8 hours. The caption read, HOA chair screams at pregnant woman over her belly. Mayor's legal advisor steps in. But it wasn't just the view count that mattered. It was the rage in the comments. She called pregnancy a visual violation. That's eugenics in pastels. Imagine thinking you can police someone's body shape with a clipboard. Where is the real HOA? Oh, wait, she's fake. Time to burn the whole system down. Even before I reached the office that morning, 5 reporters had left voicemails, 2 civil rights lawyers had requested a meeting, and my inbox overflowing with residents from other neighborhoods describing similar fake HOA harassment. But here's what blew the door off everything: one anonymous email. No subject line, just a sentence and an attachment. Karen isn't the only one. She's just one node. I opened the file. It was a spreadsheet over 600 rows. Each row listed a neighborhood name, a council or foundation name, the lead compliance chair, donor affiliations, and a strange column titled Score Demographic Stability 110. My heart froze. The neighborhoods were all across the county. The foundations were copy-paste versions of Karen's flowery language. Dissolved HOAs rebranded into civic image councils, cultural harmony boards, and legacy visual alliances. And that last column, demographic stability, was code for racial and economic homogeneity. The higher the number, the whiter and wealthier the neighborhood remained. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was a note compiled by Shearer and Langford for Phase 2. Asset flipping and appraisal escalation. Gregory Shearer. Karen's co-founder was just the puppet master's apprentice. Langford. That was Douglas Langford, a major property investor, donor to several conservative civic groups, and a name I recognized from 2 separate lawsuits accusing him of discriminatory housing practices in the 90s. I picked up my phone. This isn't about Karen anymore. I told Mayor Navarro, this is a housing cartel. By 3 p.m., we had city council members in a closed-door meeting. By 6 p.m., I was sitting across from a local news anchor. I didn't say Karen's name. I didn't need to. I said, we have uncovered a coordinated pattern of harassment masquerading as neighborhood stewardship. Pregnant women, renters, and non-white families have been targeted under the illusion of aesthetic management. This has nothing to do with grass height or mailbox color. This is about control. And in Oak Ridge, we will not tolerate a single inch of it. Karen, predictably, had her own response. She appeared on a live stream hosted by a group called the Neighborhood Order League, a YouTube channel with 4,000 subscribers, mostly HOA hobbyists and urbanization skeptics. Wearing a pastel sweater set, she smiled and said, "I'm being demonized for preserving decency. If people feel ashamed of how they look in public, maybe that's their conscience speaking. I never threw garbage. I discarded waste. And I never mocked that woman. I described what I saw." That was the third time she forgot people were recording, because someone pulled yet another video, this one from a doorbell cam, showing her laughing with a neighbor while gesturing at Amina pregnancy or performance either way. She's bloated the block. It aired on Channel 5 that night. Karen's smile on the live stream vanished. Mid-sentence, mid-defensiveness. You could actually see the moment she realized the footage had gone mainstream. And then the real HOA survivors came forward. Amina and I returned to the neighborhood center that weekend, where over 50 residents from Eastwood Ridge and surrounding developments gathered to share their stories. One woman said Karen fined her for wearing a head wrap. A man said he received a nuisance warning because his son uses a wheelchair and the ramp was non-standard. A teen girl said Karen told her, "Your clothes lower the visual tone of our curb." Amina listened, quiet, calm. Then she stood, rested one hand on her belly, and said, "They tried to bury me in paperwork and shame, but I grew life anyway. And that life will never be told it was out of place." Applause followed. No screaming, no picket signs, just clarity. Karen was finished. The legal term is civil racketeering, but the neighborhood called it paper crown tyranny. By Monday morning, we had compiled enough documentation to open a joint city-state investigation into Douglas Langford, Gregory Shearer, and their network of shell neighborhood trusts. Karen Forrester's name was now bolded on the case file, not as a witness, but as a primary participant in coordinated harassment, extortion, and regulatory fraud. Mayor Navarro authorized me to prepare a municipal ordinance, one that would change how HOA enforcement worked across the city. But first, I needed to bring it to the people who mattered most, the victims. We held a public forum at the Civic Commons Hall, and not the fancy upstairs ballroom, but the ground floor where everyone could enter. It was standing room only. I took the mic and said Karen's rules were not just unkind, they were illegal, but they were also symptomatic of a system that gave unchecked power to anyone who laminated a binder. We're going to change that permanently. I laid out the Housing Equity and Neighborhood Oversight Act, a 26-page ordinance with teeth. It did three things: banned non-registered HOAs and made it a misdemeanor to impersonate one, created a city-run resident ombuds office to mediate disputes fairly, required all neighborhood guidelines to pass legal review and be accessible in 5 languages. There were cheers, hugs. One woman brought me a peach cobbler. Amina called it the sweetest law I've ever tasted. Karen. She went silent. Her YouTube pals vanished too. Even the Neighborhood Order League channel deleted every video and issued a 6-second apology. But we weren't done. Because Douglas Langford, the man behind the spreadsheets, had just testified under subpoena in a separate real estate investigation in Fairfax. Under oath, he admitted, "Yeah, the Harmony boards were our model. We'd identify neighborhoods with low resistance scores, code for underinformed or mixed demographic communities, and send in someone charismatic to take over with appearance codes. Pregnant women renters. They're unstable variables. We don't want instability in a flip zone." He used the phrase flip zone like it was just business. The courtroom gasped. So did I, because he said the quiet part out loud. News broke that night, not just in Oak Ridge, not just in Virginia, but nationally. MSNBC ran a segment titled "Fake HOAs, the New Front in Housing Discrimination." CNN interviewed Amina. They showed the video, the splattered garbage, Karen's tantrum, the broom waving side by side with footage of Amina standing calmly at the community forum, one hand on her belly, the other gripping a mic. "I didn't ask to become a symbol," she said. "I just wanted to take a walk, to check my mail, to be seen." 3 days later, I received a call from the governor's office. They were reviewing our ordinance as a model framework for statewide adoption. The city council passed it unanimously. Karen was formally charged with impersonation of a public official, discriminatory harassment, and fraudulent solicitation of funds. She was arrested quietly, no cuffs, no cameras, but poetic justice. She was booked by an officer whose own wife had once received a visual violation warning while pregnant in another Langford Flip neighborhood. The officer handed me the report and said, "She called my daughter a hazard. Thank you for showing her what justice looks like." The courthouse overflowed with people. Some had driven in from other counties. A few wore shirts that said, "Pregnancy is not pollution." One woman held a cardboard sign painted in soft pastels, "My body, my block, my right." Karen Forrester walked in wearing white, not the color of innocence, the color of manipulation. She sat stiffly at the defendant's table, flanked by two public attorneys who looked like they knew better but had no choice. When the bailiff called the court to order, a woman in the gallery whispered, "She threw trash at a baby." And then, silence. The prosecution laid it out like clockwork exhibits of Karen's fake HOA packets, her forged fines, and her partnership with Gregory Shearer. Email records where she described my wife's pregnancy as a curb-level contamination risk. Testimony from multiple neighbors, including two elderly women fined for having unsightly walkers. And most damning footage of her laughing about raising neighborhood equity by discouraging visible breeders. Karen's defense. She said she was performing civic stewardship in the absence of order. She claimed she never physically threw trash, only redirected misplaced waste. And then, when shown the footage, she said that video was clearly taken out of compassion. Even the jury couldn't hide their expression. The judge called a recess. I stepped outside, checked my phone. 3 missed calls. 1 text from Amina's number. "It's happening." I sprinted from the courthouse. By the time I reached Oak Ridge General, Amina was already 7 centimeters dilated. She looked up at me, gritted her teeth, and said, "Don't let her define what this child is born into." I kissed her hand. "I won't. Not a chance." 4 hours later, our daughter came into the world. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that could shake the roof. We named her Justice Amira Brooks. I told the nurse, "That name belongs in a docket one day." Back at City Hall, we held a press conference streamed live by 3 networks. I stood at the podium, my newborn daughter asleep in a sling against my chest. Amina beside me, glowing and upright. I said this isn't just about one woman with a clipboard and a grudge. It's about every system that let her believe she was entitled to decide who belongs and who pollutes. That system is over. Today, we replace it with one that sees everyone, especially those still forming inside their mothers, as welcome, protected, and sacred. The crowd applauded, but it was quiet applause, not riotous, not self-congratulatory. It was reverent. Karen was found guilty on all 3 counts. Sentenced to 6 months in county jail, your 200 hours of community service, and a mandatory public apology broadcast on the same local network that aired her attack. She read it stiffly, eyes down, but people didn't care whether she meant it, because the apology wasn't the justice. The change was. 6 weeks later, our ordinance, the Housing Equity and Neighborhood Oversight Act, was adopted by 3 other cities. 2 months after that, a federal advisory committee invited me to D.C. to speak. They called it a model for protecting civil dignity against aesthetic tyranny. In Amina, she started a foundation, Cradles and Curbs. Its mission to protect pregnant people and young families from housing discrimination. They've already helped 213 cases across 11 states. We still live in Eastwood Ridge. Same cul-de-sac, same porch swing. Only now there are baby strollers parked in driveways, porch flags that say "All bellies welcome," and on the wall next to our mailbox a small bronze plaque that reads, "This block once tried to silence a woman's body. Now, it celebrates every life it almost erased." Have you or someone you know faced discrimination in your community for simply existing pregnant, disabled, different, or new? Do you believe aesthetic codes should be used for safety or as weapons of exclusion? Join the conversation. Speak up. Because justice doesn't only live in courtrooms, it lives in cul-de-sacs, mailboxes, and the quiet courage of someone choosing to stay.